And Olivia's here too?
No, Olivia.
Okay, gotcha.
I can text her to see if there's any issues.
Don't want to leave her out. But all right. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:09 p.m. I would also like to announce that this meeting is being recorded. May I have a roll call?
Director Aguilar?
Here.
Director Freeman?
Here.
Dr. Topliff?
Here.
Director Deschler?
Here.
Director Schultz?
Oh, here. Director Schultz.
Director Brandt?
Here.
And Director Craig is not here.
Not here. All right. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Chumash people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who called this place, Anascoyo, the land that Isla Vista sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. At this point, I'd like to move on to the consent agenda. Any directors like to make a motion or ask a question or anything about this consent agenda?
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
All right. Is there a second? We have the motion by Topliff and the second by Deschler. Is there any public comment on this motion? I see no public comment. And to be clear, we do a roll call vote when folks. Yeah. All right. On this motion, may I have a roll call vote?
When people are zooming in, we have to take every call by roll call. Director Topliff?
Yes.
Director Brandt?
Yes.
Director Schultz?
Yes.
Director Aguilar?
Yes.
Director Freeman?
Yes.
Director Deschler?
Yes. Here.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to move on to the public comment period. Any member of the public may speak on matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board of directors that are not on the agenda. The board will not take action on any item not on the agenda except as provided by law. Is there any public comment at this time?
No public comment.
No public comment, none in the room. So we can move on to our discussion and action items. We have item 4.1, fiscal year 2024-2025. Salary and wage schedule economic adjustment.
Okay, so the recommended action today is to apply the 4% economic adjustment to the wage schedule for all the district positions. We have a policy that we adopted in 2022 that says every year we have to review the March Consumer Price Index for Los Angeles area that we're included in and make a determination on what we want the economic adjustment to be. So we don't match what the CPI is necessarily. It's just our benchmark that we look at. And it is optional. We don't have to do this. But the finance committee reviewed the CPI, which was 4% in March and compared to 3.7% last March, and balanced that cost with the larger budget and employee retention goals. And the finance committee decided to do the budget assuming the 4%, but the board needs to take action to make that a reality. And so on the staff report, you'll see the cost for the cost of living adjustment, which is $20,000 for permanent employees and $4,000 for the temporary employees. I put here just for context for the temporary employees, it's either $4,400 to give them the COLA, or if we don't give the COLA and keep the allocated amount for temporary employees the same, it means there's $242 hours less of work to assign, if that makes sense. So they can work less by 240 hours or allocate the COLA for 4,000. But we're recommending it to be across the board. And this, we attached the CPI index that we looked at finance committee, which says it was 4% March 2024.
All right, thank you for that update, Do any members of the finance committee wish to share any thoughts or feedback having reviewed this?
I think Jonathan pretty well covered it. Obviously, we have an issue with our budget this year, and so we did really look hard at that, that we felt like it was very important to demonstrate to our employees the value of their work and our acknowledgement that we're living in an era where there are a lot of price pressures. And so we want them to feel like we want to help them to be able to deal.
All right. Are there any questions from any board members at this time? Yes. Dr.
Can
Deschler.
you define a temporary employee?
It's employees, I can pull up the exact definition, but it's essentially our employees that are working less than 1,000 hours in a year, and they are not benefited, and they're part-time, and so they perform jobs like interns or the dirt riders for the compost collective or our cleanup crew in Ivy Beautiful, but they're not permanent employees, and they do have limited term employment with us and only a maximum of hours they can work per year.
Got it.
Are temporary employees eligible for the 5% increase?
In our wage schedule, they are.
Okay.
Yeah. It's pretty small
Mhm.
usually though.
So our temporary employees get performance evaluations?
They do.
Okay.
We don't have a lot that stay a year,
Got it.
so it's not that many of them get.
All right. I'll just make sure there's any public comment at this time on this item. Please raise your hand on Zoom or let us know. I don't see any at this time, so move on to board comment. Is there any board comment on this item?
I'd like to move approval.
I'll second.
All right, we have the motion by Topliff and the second by Freeman. Is there any public comment on this motion? I see none. May I have a roll call vote?
Director Topliff,
Yes.
Director Schultz,
Yes.
Director Brandt,
Yes.
Director Aguilar,
Yes.
Director Freeman,
Yes.
Director Deschler.
Yes.
All right, thank you. This motion passes. Now we can move on to item 4.2, fiscal year 2024-25 preliminary budget.
All right, so I'll walk through the high level things here, and then I'm happy to take questions. So we have our preliminary budget up for approval for 24-25. We are still far away from a final budget because what we've talked about before, having revenue issues. We want to wait until the June numbers for the tax come in to help finalize the budget, as well as other factors we're still in negotiation to resolve. So it is very much a preliminary budget, more than most years this year. The planned revenues are $1.9 million. And the majority of that, as always, is the utility user tax, which is $1,337 projected. That's a variance of 41,000 in the negative from what we were planning for this year. So next year's revenue is going to be less than this year's planned revenue. Where this is one of the big question marks is the IVCSD grant to the district. That is planned to be 440,000, but we're still in negotiation to do that, to have that. So that's a placeholder number. The other expenses are pretty minor. It's compost sales, 5,000, festival sponsorships, 3,000. The next big ticket one is the charges for services, which is 40,000. The majority of that is the planned community spaces rental program fees that the goal that the finance committee set would be to recoup at least the janitorial costs with the fees that we end up placing on the community center and community room rental. We spend about 25,000 on janitorial costs, so that's the goal to raise in that area. And then this is the biggest policy decision in the revenue side is well, $10,000 of revenue is going to be drawing from a fund balance we had since 2018 for the mediation program. That's not controversial, I think. But the main one is the $100,000 we're going to draw from our undesignated fund balance to maintain current operations. So since our revenue has decreased, we've made cuts in the expenditure side, but the finance committee didn't want to make an additional $100,000 cuts. We did make $100,000 already in cuts, but then we felt that drawing $100,000 from fund balance to maintain operations would be better than more drastic reductions in expenses. So that's the revenue side of things. I'll go over just the top line numbers for the programs, what we're spending and any major changes, and I'm happy to answer questions. But in operations, we're spending $820,000. That's an increase, but it's an increase that's happening within the program because we did the restructure. That wasn't a big cost increase. It was about $9,000 in new spending. So we have the assistant general manager position now in the operations budget. The community engagement budget is pretty much the same. We still have the 2 staff people there. We did reduce the marketing budget. That was one of the reductions we made to be able to help balance the budget. We made reductions in the office program as well. It's $23,000 now to reduce our office costs by about half. And then finally, our administrative program. This is higher because it's out of our control in a way, because our insurance costs for our general liability insurance have gone way up this year. Our vendor had to have pretty high increases in general liability insurance costs. So that one we could not make a cut on because these are required expenses. We could look at a different provider in the future if that's something we wanted to do, but we weren't able to for this budget. The board area is the same, 28,000. Community programs, we have it's a decrease in community programs. We made significant reductions in this area. We got rid of the community spaces program manager role, which was Maya's old role, and so now we have only the community spaces project manager, who's part of the restructures. We have the community engagement and programs director overseeing this area now. So that's where the cost savings. It looks like an increase, but it was a savings there. For the project manager, we have budget for that position to remain half-time for 2 months, and then depending on the revenue continuing to be consistent, we could upgrade it to 10 months for 10 months of full-time pay in that position. And that was something we talked about at our retreat, but otherwise we made cuts to the general program budget for the community center. We're able to maintain all our regular classes and just remove some that weren't working out as well, and just have less funding for general events. So that's one major change. Nothing in special projects. Sexual assault services was reduced by a couple thousand, but hasn't really been spent in the past. The community garden is 30,000, and that's what they proposed, and is not an increase. It's technically staying the same, if not a small decrease. Compost collective, cuts were made, but the overall program budget increased slightly because of health insurance and labor costs from the COLA, but we did make cuts in reducing the extra help budget to service less households for collection, and as well as reductions in the marketing and equipment costs. Community festivals, we kept the same. Housing mediation, we removed the intern position that we had funded but not hired. So we removed that spending. The public safety area is unchanged, but this is subject to the negotiations with UCSB. So I'm gonna pass over these this time and we'll go into depth more in August. IV safe budget is the same. Parking is a small amount left to finish the contract, 15,000. And in IV Beautiful, we made reductions as well. We cut See Click Fix, we reduced the equipment budget, and we incorporated the litter pickup program from a contracting out to our extra help and labor, so our internal staff. And then we kept the move out budget the same, and we cut the community planning budget to 0 since it's not a pertinent and urgent project we're working on, but we will work on it eventually. So that's the budget. It ends up being 1.9 million in expenses. So it's balanced using $100,000 of fund balance that we had in undesignated fund balance. And that would leave our fund balance, our savings account essentially at the end of this year to be $118,000. And that's a big reduction because we also put $250,000 into our parking account. So we made a new parking savings account. So the fund balance as a whole is reducing by $100,000, but it just looks like our undesignated fund balance got way smaller because we moved a portion of it within the fund balance to be specifically for parking, the parking enforcement program startup. That's pretty much it on the budget. There's other attachments in here for your information, like our revenue history and salary and benefits projections, but those are just supplementary information.
All right, thank you for that update. Are there any questions from any directors at this time?
Okay.
Yes.
Questions? So, so to balance this, to get us where we are, you took 100,000 from our undesignated fund balance. And how much cuts were made? Because you mentioned as you went through your proposal that through the budget that there's a number of cuts, and I just wondered
100,000.
100,000. So we were 200,000 that you were trying to find, and you did 50-50. Okay.
Yeah.
So going into next year, I think it was 41,000. We're looking at a reduction in 41,000. Do we in revenue?
Yes. In revenue.
And so can we anticipate next year how much more we will have to make up? Is it going to be more than 41,000? We just don't know yet.
We really don't know. I've been working with the gas company now to try to figure out, that's the most drastic change is the gas.
Mhm.
All the other revenue, if I actually bring it up, they all ended up stabilizing a good amount.
Mhm.
It's the gas, that's the main issue. So electricity is up 4% now. Water's up 5%, trash is down 2%, which is another issue I've shared a little bit about. But gas is down 28%. And so that's a pretty drastic change when it's historically been going up 30% a year over a year. So I'm gonna meet with them to figure that out, and we're gonna be meeting with all of these groups to just learn more. But yeah, we can't. We're using the most conservative prediction, which is what we collected this year.
Got it.
Yeah, and we never project more than that, and that's why it's so stark what happened this year is because energy and utility costs presumably always go up, and this year we didn't not meet like a projection to grow. We went backwards, which was this most surprising thing.
And okay, I have another question. So, and then next year's budget is, I think you said 440,000 from UCSB?
Yes, and that would be, the idea would be that 440,000 would be specifically to fund public safety programs as well as move out. So the interpersonal violence investigator, the safety stations, the community festivals, and then move out.
So is the expectation is that be 440,000 for 1 year?
For a term. So we're still we have to do
Okay,
the
got it.
negotiation, but yeah,
Okay,
but it wouldn't be, because what it's been in the past is, 200,000
right,
to do what you want with it.
Right.
But we want to designate it to these specific programs.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is if you don't get that 440,000 next year, then there's gonna be a deficit.
There will be serious decisions
Okay.
to make.
Okay, so that's an interesting thing to think about, is like, at what point, like, what is the drop dead date for that decision to be made so that you can start to plan for next year?
Yeah, I mean, August 13th is when we plan to approve our final budget.
Got it, okay. Yikes, oh my, so.
But
Hey,
there's, I mean, I don't want to put it. Yeah.
Jeez, scared the hell out of me.
Oh,
Yeah, go
sorry.
ahead.
I had a question, but if you were still answering something, go ahead.
I was just gonna say one last sentence, which is, it's very difficult for our budget without the UCSB contribution to fund those other projects. I mean, they've all been funded through the UCSB contribution for many years
Right,
already. And so especially the safety stations since inception has only been funded by the UCSB contribution. The festival has been half and half with us and UCSB. And so the same with the investigator has been fully funded by UCSB. So all these things, we're hoping to have just a status quo, but their costs have grown. The investigator used to be 150,000, now it's 220,000. That's a really big jump that we have no control over because it's a contract negotiated with the UC Regents and the police department. So. Yeah, go ahead, Spencer. Yeah.
Can you pull up the full budget document? Because I had a question about the fund balance that we're using to essentially balance the budget. And can you show us how much fund balance did we put in last year?
Last year, like 22-23 or 23-24?
23-24.
Okay, so here's our fund balance levels. So we ended 22-23 with 2.2 million in fund balance and 640,000 was undesignated. We're ending this year at 2 million in fund balance, so a reduction of almost 200,000 and undesignated of 410,000. So we spent a lot of fund balance this year. We're going to spend a lot of fund balance this year because we had specific plans for it. 100,000 of it was to jumpstart the sales for the compost collective. 100,000 was for the parking study. Well, that's actually almost all of it. Those two things together is what we spent our fund balance for in this fiscal year that in the budget we approved a year ago. Next year we're planning to have 1.9 million. So it's $100,000 reduction in fund balance from this June to next June. So it looks like there's more, like the changes look more drastic in the undesignated fund balance, but the overall fund balance is still pretty strong at almost $2 million. And we
so
are maintaining committed. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, we haven't touched at all our committed fund balances, like our reserve, our strategic reserve, our capital reserve, our self-insurance reserve, our maintenance fund. All of those are fully funded at 1.5 million and don't need to be used. And that's like one of the purposes of the strategic reserve technically too, is if you have revenue interruptions, but we haven't had to touch it.
So I think it's important for the board and for the public to understand that even though when you look at this chart, you can say that we've got a lot of money saved up in the bank. When we have spent fund balance in the past, it has been on one-time projects like parking or other needs. And this is the first year, am I correct, that we have been using a large amount of fund balance to just maintain ongoing costs?
Yeah, We used some last year or this fiscal year for ongoing costs, but not 100,000. So
Thanks.
All right, I'll ask if there's any public comment on this item at this time. No public here with us, none on Zoom, so I'll come back to the board if there's any further board commentary or discussion on this item.
I have a comment.
Yes, please.
Shocking. So I have a comment, and I think I make this comment every year. Oh, I sound like you, Jay. But I just wanna run through something. In looking through the preliminary budget. So, let's see. So when I look at, kind of the main things that the district does, basic main things. We have the, Isla Vista Community Center, the community room, 175,000. Okay, we have, community engagement. Where's that one? Here we go. 238,000, okay? So 238,000, community engagement, and we've got community programs. Let's see, where's the, did that one. Then I wanted to go to Isla Vista Beautiful.
just a little more.
Thank you. Okay, so then we go to, okay, the safety stations, go down, thank you. Go down. Okay, so then keep going, Kirsten.
There it is. Oh, no, one more,
One more.
after part. It's one of the last ones. There.
Oh, Public Works graffiti abatement, 196,000. Okay, so we can kind of see where, you know, our priorities are as a district, right? Okay, so then we go to, I know you guys know where I'm going with this, but you know what? I gotta say it because it's something I think is significant. Then we go to the Community Compost Collective. It's $265,000. It's more than any other program in the district. And I just want, because we always talk about how our budget is a values document and it's about priorities and what's important, I just really want to put this out there. I don't think personally that the compost collective is more important than public works type or community engagement or community programs. And I think that it doesn't reflect what we talk about on a regular basis as what are the top several priorities of the district. So I want to put it out there. I really think that this needs to be relooked at. I just think it's way inflated. And I don't think it brings the best bang for our buck when we're talking about Isla Vista. So I just want to put it out there. I know I say this every year, but it's something that I just, when I looked at the numbers and I saw that we're putting the most money in the compost collective, really, that's more important than Ivy Beautiful, than our community engagement, where we're touching the entire community. I think we're making bad decisions here. So that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Gomes. Director Freeman.
I actually don't remember you saying that last year. I mean, it's come up a lot during prior meetings, but I don't remember coming up during a budget session last year. So I actually was like, I'm not certain what you're gonna bring up. I agree with you though. The compost collective is something that I have believed in a lot. I really wanted to have happen. It's something that I put a lot of time being on subcommittees for, related, et cetera. I had a dream of where it could go, with it kind of expanding in a way that would allow it to become budget self-sufficient in a sense. But it feels like we're in a situation where we're spending too much on it, and we really need to kind of cut it off.
I think the most easy reduction in the compost collective that we can make is to just end the collection service. That would save us another $20,000 or so on the spot. There's more difficult things that can be done, but that's the easiest thing to do immediately.
Well, let's talk about regular salaries. How many staff?
2.
get rid of one. We added one, right?
Yeah.
Get rid of one.
I'm saying that's more difficult.
I know it's more
Yeah, yeah,
difficult, but
the easiest, yeah. Yeah.
But when you have more staff, you pay more in health insurance, retirement, unemployment, blah, blah, blah. It's like, do we need 2 staff to run this program? We increased the number of staff because we were anticipating building up the program.
Mhm.
But we've got information that suggests that maybe that's not the best way to go. So do we need 2 staff?
You know, it's a hard thing. It's people that we've invested in. It's not just you know, concept of a program or the customer base or resident base that we're dealing with. And it's people, but at some point, if we're spending a lot of money, as Kirsten, I think, very correctly points out, more money than we're spending on any other program. And a lot of times we talk about what are the deep priorities of the district, what are the problems that we're trying to solve in the community. We think about things that we were kind of formed to construct. This was like a bonus mission. And it's a bonus mission that I feel like I kind of pointed us towards, and I'm kind of like having to look here and kind of say, like, you know, maybe I'm sorry, like it's we've gone a little too far in it, and maybe we need to stop doing it.
Yes, Director Scholes.
When we initially started the compost collective, what was the estimate for when it would start becoming self-sustaining? Like, how long did we think after we started it that it would no longer need extra funding from the district?
Well, it was never, we originally took it on thinking it would be grant funded, because that's what we were told could be sustained. And there was never a specific plan in 2020. Maybe Spencer can correct me, but I don't remember there being a proposal to us saying that take this on and then make revenue from it at that time. I think the revenue generation ideas came on a few years later.
Yeah,
Spencer, does that sound?
I think that's accurate. Before it was absorbed into the IVCSD, it was being run under the auspices of the Surfrider Foundation, and they were paying for all of the costs. Now, when we absorbed it, the cost estimate was probably like over 50% less than what it has grown into. And that's a decision that, you know, we've kind of all made together. I think we all voted for it when that reorganization came about a little over a year ago. So I guess I really hear the concern about it though, and it gives me heartburn to see one of our programs in here where all the other programs are making cuts. Technically having an increase. That's not because we didn't try to make cuts. We did cut a lot out of Compost Collective, but because of the way that the reorganization came in midway through last fiscal year, it looks like it's not a cut when you look at the top line number. So I don't think that it's a good idea for us to start talking about laying people off from the dais. But I do share the concern about the cost growth. And one of the things that we talked about at Finance Committee was the need for there to be some grant funding in addition to the revenue that is going to be hopefully generated from the sales. But I appreciate both of your feedback on that. I think the committee, I think I speak for us, well, me and Carrie and Olivia will hear it later, and we hear you loud and clear on that.
And I just want to say, acknowledging your concerns, and I think they're certainly very valid. And also, I do think that this is a program that is like Incubator Isla Vista, that we have the opportunity to, spread so much new good ideas here, that we're exposed to a lot of people as they come through. And this has been a very popular program with the community. Working on the committee to try and help them right size and look at their business model and so forth. I think they've done amazing things in the last year. And, you know, I don't know if anybody else has gone over and seen the little display at the Ivy Co-op with all the bags of potting soil there. And, you know, I just think that they shorten the times with their piles, and they're really cranking out a lot of product. And I just think that they've come so far and they're doing so well, and they enjoy so much love in the community that it would be a shame to be too hasty in pulling the plug.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. It is a beloved program. It's also a very long-standing program, which tends to, you know, lend itself to, it's well-known in the community. But is it the IVCSD's job to wholly subsidize this program? If it is beloved, then it should be loved financially by other entities in the community, right? And it's not. And what I look at here is, we are saying that the #1 top priority of IVCSD is a compost collective program. Really? Because that's where our budget is saying. Our budget is saying we value the compost collective more than community engagement, more than IV beautification. Really? More than safety, more than community programs? I think it's not right-sized. So I don't dispute that it's a beloved program, but it can still be a beloved program, but not wholly funded by IVCSD, right? And I'm not heartless, but I also want to be pragmatic in the sense that I just think that I don't think the #1 top priority of IVCSD is to maintain a compost collective that sometimes doesn't even acknowledge that they're part of the IVCSD. So, you know, that's really where I'm coming from. You guys can't see Marcus's face, but he's speechless, actually.
Yeah. I guess then the practical question we're looking at here, and maybe that's where, you know, the kind of like stall, like where does this conversation go, is whether or not we want to make a modification in the preliminary budget here today. Either to move the program entirely at the extreme, or to somewhat reduce its budget currently, like whether it be at the minimum, the kind of thing that Jonathan was bringing up about, like we could stop doing collection, or whether we wanted to go further and say that our target budget for next year is maybe half, and we're going to try to find grants or something to fill it up. But then that's something that, like, we're going to have to allocate time and effort towards doing. But it seems like we've got a couple options here on where to go if we want to decrease it, or if we want to leave it as it is and push the current budget. We do have an opportunity, if I understand, to do this again in August when the actual
August 13th is the final budget.
Okay.
So, and there'll be another finance committee meeting before then. So maybe that's something the board can give the committee a charge to figure out what to do for the final budget with this. So instead of doing it tonight,
Sure.
do it like, you know, pass the budget and give the finance committee a mission to figure out a new plan, whether it is to, you know, have other funding, reduction in funding.
Is the marketing coordinator a separate position?
It's within the extra help and labor. Within the 52,000.
Within that?
Yeah. It's a 10-hour a week, $20 an hour job.
And I would also just like to say that a budget is, you know, a chunk of time, but when you talk about all of the programs that are in our budget, you know, they have been ongoing over time, and, you know, they go through ebbs and flows of how things work. And I do think that we put a lot of effort this year into making the compost collective work. And I think with the good insights from Carly and kind of going back to really making excellent compost and not just focusing on the pickup, but on the product, and, you know, all the work that they've done with consultants, and really turning into a very high quality operation in a very small amount of time. Really, I think that they've really done a great job of hitting all their marks. And so maybe that was the goal in this period of time. And moving forward, the goal is to get to the point where their fine product and beloved program is drawing in support from other places.
Yeah.
And that we're not subsidizing it to this extent. And that would make total sense to me. But it also, from being on that committee, I know what the goals were for this time period. And I just think they did a magnificent job of achieving them. So I hate to just, divorce a number in the budget from that sense of the organic development of a program.
I would just say that some of what we made the decision to staff up the program, it was predicated on some things that are no longer true.
Well, and
Right.
that's very true. So we
Right?
do need
So
to
there was a
think
set of
about that.
variables that made us make that decision, but those variables we already know those don't exist anymore. And so it's not that they've done a bad job, it's that the situation has changed. It doesn't make sense for us to invest in a program where it can't be all that we envisioned it to be 6 or 8 months ago. And that's not their fault. They've done a great job. They've used their resources, they've consulted, they've come up with a business plan. It's nothing against the people that are in the program. It's that IVCSD doesn't have the same vision for the program because of externalities that we're going to come aware of.
Something I'm like gathering in the moment from like the conversation started by Director Deshler that I really appreciate, and especially the first few lines he started with, which is our budget is our value statement. And I think that what she's calling attention to is that as directors, our job has mostly, my time on the board has mostly been easy. We haven't had to make difficult, uncomfortable decisions that are on this level. We haven't had to stare down two numbers and tell the public what is true. And so I think she's calling attention to the fact that now we do have a new environmental challenge of less revenue coming in, which none of us had control over. None of us really predicted before this spring began. And as well, in this spring, we've heard of some complications around our like future, very long-term goals with waste management and compost services. Those two like new environmental factors combined, she's telling us, and I think this is a great question, is that we need to look at this as like one of our first hard questions and really wrestle with it and not just keep the boat going in the same direction for same direction's sake. So I do appreciate your question. I also really appreciate Director Freeman that you kind of like brought us back to, we have some options. It's not A and B, it's a whole alphabet of options. So I definitely am feeling some of that pull when we look at the numbers that this program, this budget letter is a statement of our values and that this program is taking a lot of our resources. Yeah, I personally, as a director, I do think it's important that this program, being one of the largest, should be looked at from the finance committee and try to give us more options on what we can do to right size it again. It's been very adaptable. The reason why it's adaptable is because the community loves it so much. That's one of the great things about this program. It can go through ebbs and flows and the community is still expecting it and wanting it and ready to be a user of a different size for us. Versus other programs, if we lose it, it's a much bigger gap for the public. And so I think this one, we can make those fine tuning changes. And so I think it's a really good, helpful inquiry that we are having right now. That's my general feedback, is that we should look into what possible changes we can make, but not dramatic ones. I'm not suggesting a huge dramatic one, but I do think it's something that we can fine tune a little bit more.
And I noticed that we just got a report from our consultant, which I didn't have a chance to review, but I was thinking that we should send that back to the committee that worked with the Compost Collective earlier this year, so that we could kind of dive down into this recommendations from that.
Could I ask a question? So when did we go from one staff person to two staff? people?
August,
August,
September.
okay.
It was after the budget was approved last.
So we have a program director and a project manager?
Yeah.
Mhm. And how many households are there now at Vista?
Well, there's 900 parcels,
900
but
parcels.
3,700 units because of
Mhm.
all the apartments and duplexes.
And this is collection service for 120 households?
Yeah, the 52,000 is about half to manage the compost piles and about half to do the collection. So the collection is
Got it.
pretty expensive.
Yeah.
We had hoped to have a fee to cover the full cost of it, but yeah, it's about 20 to 25,000 for the collection service.
If I can jump in there, though, it's 120 households this year, but because of the cuts that the finance committee made, that number will likely go down. Although we made the decision to not prescribe and say, you have to get down to a certain number, we cut the overall staff budget and said, figure it out in a way that's best for the program. But the estimate that Carly gave was 100 households with that amount of funding. I appreciate the conversation and think that these are good marching orders for us to try to look at before we adopt the final budget and to try to bring that number down. But I do feel the need to correct the priorities statement, because if you look at our budget, our biggest priority from a dollars amount has, and this has been true the entire time we've existed, it's been public safety. And that totals, about $50,000 more than the compost collective. So when I look at that, I agree. Budgets are state.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry, I was looking at the safety stations, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
And one, I don't want to get too into the accounting of it all, but one thing that is going to change in the final budget is how the programs are structured, where like community engagement is part of operations and it'll be more with the community programs area now. So it's not going to be you might not notice it, but it will be a change. So the operations budget will go down, but it's because the restructure has to be fully implemented into the budget still.
Okay, so I just, again, thank you, Spencer, for correcting me on the public safety. So basically, public safety is our highest budget program. So when you look at the compost collective, 195,000 out of 265,000 is labor, is salary.
Yeah.
So I mean, unfortunately, that's like the biggest chunk. It's, if it's a beloved program that people love, maybe it's not cutting, picking up the compost. It's, we're gonna have to make some hard choices. Unfortunately, we're not a charity, right? And we're gonna have to make hard choices. That's just the hard part of it all. But I have a question. So on another topic, so this preliminary budget does not reflect the change with an assistant general manager? It does. Okay, awesome, cool.
It has the whole restructuring.
It's all,
The
okay.
2 new positions and the eliminated position, they're all in the budget. It's just structured the old way.
Yeah.
But we're gonna restructure the flow of it to better fit the new staff structure.
Got it.
It's just a small thing.
Yeah.
Dr. Freeman.
So it sounds like Spencer has said that this feedback we provided so far is something that is good input to finance committee. So I guess then it's about whether or not anyone feels a need to actually adjust the preliminary budget today, or whether it is a matter, and what extent, I guess part of my interest in that question is, to what extent does the preliminary budget matter? Like, why do we have, or why does the government, like the government
Yeah.
in general, or our government specific,
Yeah.
have a preliminary budget as opposed to merely a final?
We're required to pass the budget by June 30th, but our deadline is September 1st.
I don't understand what that means.
Yeah.
How are you
I mean,
required to do something, but the deadline is late?
because we don't have all the information for our budget yet. Like,
Okay.
our revenue numbers aren't final yet. We don't
Okay.
know the June revenue, so we can't predict next year's.
Who is
June.
requiring us to do something, and then who is picking the deadline?
Jamie can answer. It's in the government code. These deadlines and dates of when we have to do certain things.
Okay.
So we have until September 1st to pass the final budget, but we have to pass something today just to start the fiscal year. Because our fiscal year starts July 1st. So we need to have something to work
Okay.
off of
I see.
That makes sense.
for the fiscal year, but we don't have to finalize it until August.
Okay. Given that I then don't think that we're gonna be making a change literally immediately, and we're going to be passing, because until we get feedback from finance committee, I feel maybe it does make sense to pass this preliminary budget and then get the feedback from finance committee and then adjust the budget for the remainder of the year when we get that.
Yeah, in August, you'll be receiving an updated proposal. So if the finance committee makes any changes or we get our new revenue numbers, the proposed final budget will be different in some way, at least in one way. Then the revenue number will be different. But then there can be other changes made based on the input today.
Yeah.
And then that point, anybody can change that final budget at the August 13th meeting if you get a majority vote.
The negotiations with UCSB are not yet scheduled, so
We're
not
working on it. Yeah, now that the
But we're not-
graduation
Yeah,
time and
we have to.
yeah, we have to figure that out, but we at least have a plan for what we want to do there.
Well, I would just like to say, in terms of the money coming from reserves to balance this budget, that I think in general that when taxpayers pay money, they expect to get services and not a buildup of reserves. So I think that we have been very prudent in designating reserves, keeping the amount of prudent reserves to cushion us for a variety of potential contingencies that might happen in the future. But in general,
dropped
I think that spending from reserves is not imprudent. It's acknowledgement that our revenue flows and our spending flows don't always end up in perfect alignment. But I do believe that the public should get services for their money, and that it should not be something that we're proud of, that we have a lot of money in reserves.
Did you say prudent or imprudent?
What was
She
the
said
whole sentence?
You said
Oh.
it's not imprudent.
Not imprudent. Oh, got it.
Double
Yeah, yeah,
negative.
yeah. Yeah, got it.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Do we need to do something? Oh, no, they're there.
They're back.
Oh, they're back.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna.
Sorry, we had an unplanned computer restart,
Logical issues,
but we are here.
Oh, and you're much bigger now.
Yeah.
I know, and the chairs are
Oh, right.
smaller, that's cool. I hope they're not uncomfortable.
No, we feel great. It's nice and air conditioned.
Ten
Uh,
PM, and
We
it's-
don't want
I
to hear
can
about that. It is so hot here. I'm looking to see if there's anything else I can take off.
We do have air conditioning. I mean, it's not on.
It's
but we
probably
do
on
have it.
full, right? It's probably on, like, it's
Different
max
room.
right now.
Can I just add that I really agree with Carrie's remarks. The whole reason that we have fund balance and reserves and that we've been prudent is to weather financial downturns. And we're not in a major one, we're in a minor one, but that's what we've squirreled away the money to do. So it's our fiscal restraint that helps us not have to make drastic decisions. And we have the luxury of getting to decide, how can we right size things in a way that makes sense. And at the same time this year, we're continuing such valuable partnerships with Community Garden, popular programming at the community center, our important public safety programs. And on top of that, we have allocated the $250,000 towards actually implementing parking. which is not the entire cost, but it is a big chunk of it. So I think we are setting, well, there's a lot of unknowns. We're setting ourselves up for success.
Good work, Finance Committee, Jonathan. Now what?
We need a motion to approve the preliminary budget.
Do we need to make a motion on giving direction to finance?
Yeah, you can include that in this motion or make a separate motion.
Okay.
Maybe better to have two separate ones, but it's up to you. It's really style.
You would be slightly cooler if you moved two chairs.
I feel
Okay.
cooler already.
So do we want to
Is it-
move approval and then have a motion on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that might
I
be
think that's all I do.
easier.
Okay, okay, I'll move approval of this item and then add a motion. So I'm gonna
We'll
do
do one at a time. We'll
Okay,
take the first.
I'll second.
Okay, we have the motion by Deschler and the second by Topliff.
What was the motion, sorry?
move approval of the preliminary budget.
And we're not putting in the motion.
A separate
direction.
motion.
Gonna do
They're
separate
okay, all
motion.
right.
I'm gonna get instructions on how to do that.
Okay.
Is there any public comment on this motion? I see none. May I have a roll call vote?
Director Topliff,
Yes.
Director Brandt,
Yes.
Director Schulz,
Yes.
Director Aguilar,
Yes.
Freeman,
Yes.
Deschler.
Yes,
All right, this motion passes.
And this next motion, it's up to you how you want to phrase it, but it's whatever direction you want to give us.
okay. So I'd like to make a motion to direct the finance committee to look at the compost collective program budget and give options for making reductions for the next fiscal year.
I'll second that.
That was good, but I think you just need to repeat it so we can capture it.
Oh, good Lord, okay. I'm,
To
wait,
direct
wait,
the finance committee,
say that again?
to direct the.
Oh, I'd like to
finance
direct
committee.
the finance committee to look at the compost collective program budget and give a list of what?
Oh, give us options.
Give us a list of options for possible reductions in the next fiscal year, in the new fiscal year. In this fiscal year, in the new fiscal year.
I got you.
Who was the second on the original motion?
Yeah,
No.
thank you. It's a lot of motions in one meeting, guys.
All right, is there any public comment on this motion? I see none. May I have a roll call vote?
And yeah, just to read it again,
Yeah.
direct the finance committee to look at the compost collective program budget and give the board a list of options for possible reductions in the new fiscal year. This is Deschler and Topliff as well.
Yes.
Okay, Director Topliff,
Yes.
Brandt,
Yes.
Schulz,
Yes.
Aguilar,
Yes.
Freeman,
Yes.
Deschler.
Yes,
All right, this motion passes. Now we can move on to item 4.3, fiscal year 2023-24 budget adjustments.
Okay, well, a lot of this is a little routine since we've approved a lot of this funding already, but essentially this is like the difference between authorizing and appropriating funds. The board has spent funds over the last year on things that have come up that weren't originally in the budget. But we need to just do a budget adjustment to give them the authorization to have the budget for those funds. So all these things are should not be surprises. It's things we approve, like the acoustics project, for example, the bathrooms on DP. The Goucher Creative, which we're needing, this one we might not end up doing. We're hoping to get the UCSB contribution, like what's suggested to fund that one. The rent for our garage that wasn't originally in the budget. It is in the next budget in 24-25. But these are all expenditures we approved, but they don't have a budgeted source, like a funding source in the budget. And on the side here, it has the funding source, fund balance, except one, which is UCSB contribution. So that's what budget adjustments do. It's like a year-end cleanup of our budget and acknowledgement that the budget has changed since we approved it to include all these things. And even though it says $83,000 in additions, we had other underspends and other line item accounts. So we're still gonna end next year's budget in a better position than we planned. We're still taking 243,000 out of fund balance like we had intended, but we're gonna add 40,000 back in. So it's a net of 200,000. So that's better than we originally wanted. So this looks like, oh, whoa, a lot more spending. But overall, it doesn't factor into more spending. It's just the because of other reductions in spending that we had. So yeah, it's a, I don't want to say routine thing, but the board's already made a lot of these decisions. So we just need to have this authorization so we could put into the accounting system. Yeah, all governments have to do budget adjustments. It's a standard practice.
All right, thank you for that clarification, explanation. Is there any questions on this item for any board members? I see no questions, so I'll ask if there's any public comment or questions on this item. I see none. Is there any further board comment or questions, discussion on this item?
I'll move to approve.
All right,
Second.
we have the
Where I do.
motion by Topliff and the second by Deschler. Is there any public comment on this motion? I see none. May I have a roll call vote?
Right, Director, oops, I lost my place. Director Topliff,
Yes.
Brandt,
Yes.
Schulz,
Yes.
Aguilar,
Yes,
Freeman,
Yes.
Deschler.
Yes.
this motion passes. Let me go back.
Can I make a very anti-Brown Act comment? It's amazing how fast our meetings go when we don't have the public here.
Anti-Brown.
Well, I mean,
That's more like anti-public. That's bad.
well, it's
Deeper.
just, yeah, I guess it's not Brown. It's more like.
Those are inside thoughts.
You're right.
All right,
Oh, goodness.
that concludes our discussion and action items. Now we can move on to item 5, reports. We have 5.1 reports from members of the board. Are there any board members with reports they would like to share?
This isn't really a report, but I wanted to acknowledge that the agenda came out on Friday this week, which I thought was wonderful. And I hear that it's being attributed to Sydney in her new role.
Yay.
I think it's awesome. So thank
That's
you.
awesome.
And lots of help from Shirley.
That's great. That's a good observation.
Great observation.
I
Are there
also
any
had
other-
one that's a little bit of praise for both Sydney and for law enforcement. We had the scary situation last week with the animal abuse, and it was while Jonathan was away. I had a chance to attend the memorial that they hosted at St. Mike's, and you know, it's a scary thing for the community because we've had such a history of violence, and we know animal abuse can be a precursor to violence against humans too. So just thanks to everyone for being on that and getting the information out to the public.
Thank you for that reminder. Is there any other reports from members of the board? I see none, so I'll move on to reports from standing and ad hoc committees. Are there any committees that have reports to share? I see none. Report from district council.
Nothing from me.
All right, thank you. And report from our general manager and staff.
I don't have a lot of report because I was on vacation almost the entire time since the last board meeting, but a couple things I'll mention is there's a lighting project. So you all know about the new sign in front of the community center. The county is going to be doing an additional project to dig electrical outlets, or not outlets, electrical connections to the sign so it can be lit up at night. And I'm trying to work with them so that they could do the same thing for our new arm gate so that we don't have to dig twice. So that's, you know, that'll be a lit up sign at night now. And they have a grant that they're using to fund all that. And I'm still working with the county on the settlement funds and how to use them. I can't share anything in public right now, but I am told that the county will bring a decision in July to the Board of Supervisors on how to spend those funds, so I'll keep you updated. And then Jenna and Spencer and I attended the Safe Parking Program 50th anniversary event. It was really nice. We're one of, we participate in that program as IVCSD. So those are all my reports. I don't know, Sydney, if you have anything else.
Yeah, just in relation to the animal abuse case, we are waiting for, we have been, that we were contacted in regard to a $2,000 reward.
Hmm.
So we're just trying to get that in writing, and once that's done, we'll ask for community support for any information that anyone may have in regards to the suspect. We have a really granular photo, which isn't super helpful because the individual is wearing a ski mask, but any information leading to the arrest of the suspect, we do have that reward available. So that is, we're hoping to kind of close that up soon, get some more information. And then last night we held our final parking and mobility focus group for Spanish speaking families. That went really well. And that's officially concluded that chapter of engagement, which was wild and very
That's so
exciting.
I think we hit every group possible in Isla Vista, every
Yeah.
way you can slice it.
I
So.
think
So
so.
great.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for those reports. And now I'll move on to the future meeting dates and future agenda items. Are there any future agenda items that directors wish to add to our growing list?
It's gonna be a light July meeting. Right now, we only have two things on the agenda for July, which is an update on our LAFCO municipal services review and our annual tax roll. We have to pass a resolution every year to assess the sewage tax.
All right, and the next regular meeting of the Board of Directors will take place on July 23rd, 2024 at 6 p.m. on Zoom and at the community room right here, 970 Embarcadero Del Mar, Isla Vista, California. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Wow.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.